The morning sun cast long shadows across the peaceful suburb of Riverside, California, where manicured lawns and white picket fences painted the picture of American dreams come true. Sarah Martinez hummed softly as she prepared her daughter's favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the kitchen window offering a perfect view of 7-year-old Lily playing in her beloved sandbox just 20 feet away. The little girl's curly brown hair caught the sunlight as she carefully constructed an elaborate castle, complete with towers and moats, her pink sundress bright against the golden sand. "Mommy, look how big my castle is," Lily's voice carried through the open window, sweet and melodic, filled with the pure joy that only children possess. Sarah smiled, pausing to wave at her daughter before returning to slice fresh strawberries. The normalcy of the moment felt precious. School was out for summer, and she had planned a perfect afternoon of sandwiches in the garden, followed by a trip to the community pool where Lily could show off her newfound swimming skills. 5 more minutes, sweetheart, then lunch is ready, Sarah called back, not bothering to look up as she arranged the strawberries in Lily's favorite Disney princess bowl. The silence that followed should have been her first warning, but mothers become accustomed to the ebb and flow of children's play. Sometimes they got lost in imagination, whispered conversations with invisible friends, or became absorbed in the serious business of childhood creation. 10 minutes passed before Sarah realized the absence of her daughter's chatter. A cold finger of unease traced down her spine as she approached the window, dish towel still clutched in her hands. The sandbox sat empty, Lily's castle half-finished, her small pink shovel abandoned in the sand. The wooden gate leading to the alley behind their house swung gently in the breeze, a gate Sarah distinctly remembered checking that morning to ensure it was securely latched. "Lily?" Sarah's voice cracked as she rushed outside, her bare feet hitting the warm concrete of their patio. "Lily, honey, where are you?" She checked behind the rosebush, inside the playhouse, even inside the garage where Lily sometimes hid during games of hide-and-seek. Each empty space sent panic climbing higher in her throat. "This isn't funny anymore, baby girl. Mommy needs you to come out now." The neighbors' yards yielded nothing. Mrs. Chun from next door joined the search, her elderly face creased with concern as they called Lily's name down every street in their quiet subdivision. Mr. Patterson from across the street checked his garage and tool shed. The ice cream truck driver, Miguel, who knew every child in the neighborhood by name, hadn't seen Lily at all that day. With each passing minute, Sarah's world tilted further off its axis. By 2 p.m., Riverside Police Department received the call that would transform a routine Tuesday into every parent's living nightmare. Officer Janet Rodriguez arrived first, her patrol car's presence immediately drawing concerned neighbors from their homes. Sarah's voice had become hoarse from calling her daughter's name, her hands shaking as she provided Lily's description. 7 years old, 42 pounds, brown curly hair to her shoulders, wearing a pink sundress with white flowers and small white sandals. Detective Maria Santos arrived within 15 minutes, her 20-year career having prepared her for the grim statistics that haunted every missing child case. The first few hours were critical. After that, the chances of finding a child alive dropped dramatically. She found Sarah pacing frantically in the living room, clutching Lily's favorite stuffed elephant, while neighbors continued searching the surrounding blocks with growing desperation. "Mrs. Martinez, I need you to think carefully, Detective," Santos said, her voice gentle but urgent. "Did Lily ever wander off before? Are there any places she particularly liked to go?" Sarah shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. Lily was obedient, cautious even, the kind of child who asked permission before crossing the street and held tight to her mother's hand in crowded places. The search expanded rapidly as afternoon shadows lengthened. Riverside Fire Department. deployed their search and rescue teams, while patrol units canvassed a 5-mile radius. K-9 units were called in, their handlers explaining that Rex, a German shepherd with an exceptional track record, would arrive within the hour with his partner, Officer Jake Morrison. The community response was overwhelming. Parents from Lily's school, soccer teammates, even strangers from social media joined the search parties, spreading through Riverside's parks, abandoned buildings, and wooded areas. At 4:30 p.m., the discovery that confirmed everyone's worst fears came from a teenager walking the railway tracks behind the industrial district. Snagged on a piece of barbed wire, fluttering like a wounded butterfly, was a strip of pink fabric, with white flowers unmistakably torn from Lily's sundress. Detective Santos felt her stomach drop as she photographed the evidence, knowing this single piece of cloth transformed their search from a possible runaway situation into something far more sinister. Sarah's scream when they showed her the fabric echoed through the neighborhood, a sound of pure anguish that made hardened police officers look away. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto her front steps, clutching the stuffed elephant tighter as the reality crashed over her. Someone had taken her baby girl. Someone had ripped away the most precious thing in her world and carried Lily into an unknown darkness that every mother fears, but never truly believes will touch their family. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, FBI Agent Tom Bradley's black sedan pulled up to the Martinez home. His arrival confirmed what everyone already knew, but no one wanted to acknowledge. This was no longer a local missing person case. This was a potential kidnapping, and time was running out. The quiet suburb of Riverside would never feel safe again, not until they brought Lily home. But first, they had to find her, and every minute that ticked by made that task more desperate and dangerous. The first light of dawn broke across Riverside with cruel indifference, illuminating a community that had barely slept. Search teams had worked through the night using floodlights and thermal imaging, but 7-year-old Lily Martinez remained missing for over 18 hours. The command center, hastily established in the parking lot of Lincoln Elementary School, buzzed with controlled chaos as FBI agents coordinated with local law enforcement, volunteer searchers, and media crews that had descended on the quiet suburb like vultures. Officer Jake Morrison arrived at 6:15 a.m., his patrol unit's engine still cooling as he opened the rear door for his 4-legged partner. Rex, a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes and a jet-black coat marked by tan patches, bounded out with the eager energy of a dog ready to work. At 5 years old, Rex had already established himself as one of California's most successful search and rescue K-9 South, with 43 successful finds over his 3-year career. His partnership with Morrison was legendary within the department, a bond forged through countless hours of training and real-world missions that had saved lives and solved cases others deemed hopeless. "Ready to work, boy?" Morrison asked, his weathered hands checking Rex's specially designed tracking harness. The dog's tail wagged with anticipation, his keen nose already detecting the lingering sense of anxiety, fear, and determination that permeated the search staging area. Morrison, a 12-year veteran of the Riverside Police Department, had seen his share of missing person cases, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the way Sarah Martinez had looked at him with desperate hope when he'd briefly introduced himself the night before, or perhaps it was his own daughter Emma, just 2 years older than Lily, sleeping safely in her bed while another father's world crumbled. Detective Santos approached with a sealed evidence bag containing one of Lily's worn T-shirts, carefully preserved to maintain her scent signature. "Morrison, I need Rex to work his magic. We've got over 200 volunteers out there, but they're searching blind. We need direction, and fast." Her voice carried the weight of a case that was rapidly becoming every law enforcement officer's nightmare. A child vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and a community's shattered sense of security. Rex's transformation was immediate and remarkable. The moment Morrison presented Lily's scent article, the dog's entire demeanor shifted from friendly pet to focused professional. His nose worked methodically, processing the complex bouquet of information contained within the fabric, not just Lily's unique scent, but traces of her environment, her routine, even her emotional state from the morning she disappeared. Within seconds, Rex had locked onto the trail, his powerful legs carrying him toward the Martinez backyard with Morrison jogging behind, radio cracking with updates to the command center. The tracking led them through the neighborhood in a zigzag pattern that told a story of confusion and terror. Rex paused frequently, his sensitive nose sorting through the competing scents of search teams, media personnel, and curious onlookers who had contaminated the area. But the dog's training was exceptional, and Morrison's faith in his partner absolute. They followed the trail past the elementary school, through Roosevelt Park, where Lily had played soccer just days before, and toward the industrial section of town, where abandoned warehouses and overgrown lots provided countless hiding places. "Command, this is Morrison," he radioed, breathing heavily as Rex led him down a gravel access road behind a defunct textile factory. "Rex has got something strong here. The scent trail is fresh and focused. Requesting backup units and requesting. All volunteers stay clear of the industrial district until further notice." The urgency in his voice sent ripples through the command center, where FBI agent Bradley immediately began repositioning search teams to support the K-9 operation. Meanwhile, 40 miles away at police headquarters, Detective Lisa Huang was pursuing a different but equally crucial angle. The sex offender registry for Riverside County contained 47 names, but one stood out with disturbing clarity. Annie Walsh, 34 years old, with 2 prior convictions for child molestation. Walsh lived in a rundown apartment complex just 3 miles from the Martinez home, worked sporadically as a maintenance worker, and had been released from prison only 8 months earlier after serving 4 years for his most recent offense. Surveillance footage from a convenience store near Lily's neighborhood showed a man matching Walsh's description, purchasing zip ties, duct tape, and children's candy at 10:47 a.m. on Tuesday, less than 2 hours before Lily disappeared. The store clerk, Maria Gonzalez, positively identified Walsh from a photo lineup, remembering him specifically because his nervous behavior and strange purchase combination had made her uncomfortable. He kept looking around like he was being watched, she told Detective Huang. And who buys zip ties with candy? Something wasn't right about him. When officers arrived at Walsh's apartment complex, they found his unit empty, but recently occupied. Neighbors reported seeing him loading items into his van around midnight. Unusual behavior for a man who rarely left his apartment except for work. A search warrant was hastily obtained, and the evidence found inside made investigators' blood run cold. Children's clothing in various sizes, zip ties identical to those purchased at the convenience store, and most damning, a small pink hair ribbon that Sarah Martinez would later identify as belonging to Lily. The breakthrough came at 2:30 p.m. when Rex, now working his 6th consecutive hour, suddenly became agitated near an abandoned railroad maintenance shed. His barking echoed across the industrial wasteland, a sound that brought Morrison running despite his exhaustion. The shed's door hung open, revealing darkness that could hide terrible secrets. Rex's behavior indicated recent human presence, his trained senses detecting something his human partner couldn't perceive. "This is it," Morrison whispered into his radio, drawing his weapon as backup units surrounded the structure. "Rex has found something. Moving in now." The next few minutes would determine whether their search ended in rescue or tragedy. Rex's urgent barking pierced the afternoon air, like an alarm bell, his powerful voice echoing off the rusted walls of abandoned industrial buildings. Officer Morrison's heart hammered against his ribs as he approached the deteriorating railroad. Maintenance shed, weapon drawn, every instinct screaming that their 36-hour nightmare was about to end, one way or another. A German shepherd's behavior had shifted dramatically. Gone was the methodical tracking mode, replaced by an agitated excitement that Morrison had learned to interpret over 3 years of partnership. Rex had found something significant. Riverside Command, this is Morrison at the old Southern Pacific Maintenance Facility, he radioed, his voice tight with controlled tension. Rex has indicated a strong hit. I can see recent disturbance in the dirt around the structure. Moving to investigate with backup units. The responding crackle from headquarters carried FBI Agent Bradley's voice. Morrison, proceed with extreme caution. Paramedics and child crisis team are en route to your location. The shed's interior was a maze of shadows punctuated by shafts of dusty sunlight streaming through broken boards and rusted holes in the corrugated metal roof. Morrison's tactical flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing debris from decades of neglect, rotting railroad ties, abandoned equipment, and the unmistakable signs of recent human presence. Rex pressed forward, his nose working frantically. As he navigated around scattered tools and piles of moldering canvas, then Morrison saw her. Huddled in the far corner, partially hidden behind a stack of wooden railroad ties, 7-year-old Lily Martinez sat motionless. Her pink sundress was torn and filthy, her small body curled into a protective ball with her knees drawn up to her chest. Her once bouncing curls hung limp and tangled, framing a face that seemed to have aged years in just 2 days. But she was breathing. She was alive. Jesus Christ, Morrison whispered, immediately holstering his weapon and dropping to his knees. Lily? Honey, my name is Jake. I'm a police officer, and I'm here to take you home to your mommy. Rex, trained to remain calm during recoveries, lay down nearby, but kept his alert gaze fixed on the child, as if understanding the delicate nature of the situation. Lily's eyes, those same bright brown eyes that had sparkled with joy as she, built sandcastles just 2 days ago, stared straight ahead without acknowledgement. She didn't respond to Morrison's gentle voice, didn't flinch when paramedics entered the shed, didn't even blink when her mother's desperate voice crackled through the radio from the command center. The little girl who had chattered constantly about princesses and puppies and swimming lessons now sat in complete, terrifying silence. Dr. Jennifer Kim arrived at Riverside General Hospital's emergency department just as the ambulance pulled into the bay. As the pediatric trauma specialist on call, she had seen too many cases like this. Children rescued from nightmares that no adult should ever have to imagine, their young minds retreating into protective shells that could take months or years to crack open again. She watched as paramedics wheeled Lily into Trauma Bay 3, noting the child's catatonic state and the way she seemed to look through everything and everyone around her. Sarah Martinez's scream of joy and anguish echoed through the hospital corridors when she saw her daughter for the first time since Tuesday morning. She rushed toward the gurney, desperate to hold her baby girl, but Dr. Kim gently intercepted her. Mrs. Martinez, I know you want to comfort Lily, and we're going to help you do that. But right now, she's experiencing severe psychological trauma. We need to move very carefully to avoid causing her additional distress. A physical examination revealed the extent of Lily's ordeal. Dehydration, minor cuts and bruises, and evidence that confirmed every parent's worst nightmare. This innocent child had been sexually assaulted. But perhaps more concerning to Dr. Kim was Lily's complete psychological withdrawal. The girl who had once been a chatterbox now wouldn't speak, eat, or acknowledge the presence of the people who loved her most. Her eyes remained fixed on some invisible point in the distance, as if her mind had traveled somewhere safe, while her body endured the unthinkable. She's experiencing what we call dissociative trauma response. Dr. Kim explained to Sarah and her husband Carlos, who had rushed back from a business trip in Phoenix. Lily's mind has essentially shut down non-essential functions to protect her from processing what happened. It's actually a remarkably adaptive response. Her brain is trying to help her survive an impossible situation. Detective Santos arrived at the hospital as the medical team was completing their initial evaluation. The forensic evidence collected from Lily's clothing and person would be crucial to prosecuting whoever had done this to her. But Santos felt sick, knowing that this 7-year-old girl would eventually need to relive her trauma in a courtroom. The physical evidence was already being fast-tracked to the state crime lab, where technicians would work around the clock to identify DNA samples that could link their suspect to the crime. Meanwhile, back at police headquarters, the investigation was moving at breakneck speed. Danny Walsh remained their prime suspect. Surveillance footage, the evidence found in his apartment, and his disappearance all pointed to his guilt. But Walsh himself had vanished as completely as Lily had 2 days earlier. His van was found abandoned in a Walmart parking lot 60 miles away, wiped clean of fingerprints, but containing additional evidence that made investigators' skin crawl. Children's toys, more zip ties, and a handwritten list of local elementary schools. The community's relief at Lily's rescue was tempered by the sobering reality of her condition. Vigils continued outside the hospital as residents struggled to process how such evil could invade their peaceful suburb. Parents held their own children tighter, schools implemented new security protocols, and everyone waited for news that Danny Walsh had been captured and could never hurt another child again. But inside Trauma Bay 3, none of that mattered. Only one thing counted now: somehow finding a way to coax a terrified little girl back from the dark place where her mind had hidden to survive the unsurvivable. 3 weeks after Lily's rescue, District Attorney Rachel Cooper sat in her corner office overlooking downtown Riverside, staring at the most challenging case file of her 15-year career. The forensic evidence against Danny Walsh seemed overwhelming. His DNA found on Lily's clothing, surveillance footage placing him near the Martinez home, and the disturbing contents of his apartment, an abandoned van. Yet Walsh himself remained a ghost, vanished into the vast network of America's missing persons, despite a nationwide manhunt that had consumed thousands of man-hours and stretched across 4 states. The pressure from the community was suffocating. Parents demanded justice. Media outlets ran daily updates asking why Walsh hadn't been captured. And Mayor Patricia Hendricks called Cooper twice daily for progress reports. But the district attorney's biggest challenge wasn't the absent defendant. It was the silent victim. Lily Martinez hadn't spoken a single word since her rescue, communicating only through the occasional nod or shake of her head during the gentlest questioning from child psychologists. Dr. Lisa Chun had been treating traumatized children for 12 years, but Lily's case pushed even her considerable expertise to its limits. The 7-year-old remained locked in a protective psychological shell that seemed impenetrable. During their sessions in the specially designed therapy room at Children's Hospital, decorated with soft pastels and filled with toys designed to encourage communication, Lily would sit motionless for hours, her dark eyes fixed on some distant point that only she could see. "She's like a computer that's gone into safe mode," Dr. Chun explained to Sarah and Carlos Martinez during one of their weekly progress meetings. "Her mind is protecting her from processing traumatic memories, but that same protection is preventing her from engaging with the world around her. We need to be patient and gentle, but we also need to prepare for the possibility that traditional therapy might not be enough." The breakthrough came during their 4th week of sessions, not through words, but through art. Dr. Chun had placed crayons and paper in front of Lily countless times, but on this particular Thursday afternoon, something shifted. Lily's small, hand reached for a black crayon, and she began to draw with the focused intensity of a child completely absorbed in her task. The image that emerged made Dr. Chun's breath catch in her throat. The drawing showed a small figure, clearly meant to be Lily herself, crouched behind what appeared to be trees or large vertical lines. In the center of the page, a larger figure loomed, and beside that figure was the unmistakable shape of a four-legged animal. The man wore what looked like a uniform, indicated by buttons down the front of his shirt, and something that could be interpreted as a badge or patch on his chest. Most chilling was the dog beside him, large, alert, and drawn with surprising detail for a traumatized 7-year-old. "Lily, this is beautiful artwork," Dr. Chun said softly, careful not to show her excitement at this first real communication from her patient. "Can you tell me about your picture?" But Lily had already withdrawn again, her hand dropping the crayon as if it had suddenly become too heavy to hold. She stared at her drawing for a long moment, then pushed it away and retreated back into silence. Over the following days, Lily produced more drawings, each one depicting variations of the same scene: herself hiding, a uniformed man, and always the dog. Sometimes she drew multiple hiding places, behind trees, under structures, inside what appeared to be buildings. The consistency was remarkable, and Dr. Chun began to recognize this as Lily's way of processing and communicating her trauma. When words remained impossible, defense attorney Michael Torres knew he faced an uphill battle even before his client was captured. The evidence against Danny Walsh appeared damning, and public opinion had already convicted him in the court of social media and neighborhood gossip. But Torres also knew that cases built on emotion rather than facts often contained hidden weaknesses, and he was determined to provide Walsh with the zealous defense that the American justice system guaranteed, regardless of public sentiment. The prosecution's case relies heavily on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a severely traumatized child. Torres explained to his legal team during their preparation meeting, "We need to be prepared to challenge the reliability of that evidence, while still showing appropriate compassion for the victim. It's a delicate balance, but that's what we're trained to do." The forensic analysis had revealed some troubling inconsistencies that Torres planned to exploit. The DNA evidence, while compelling, showed signs of possible contamination due to the number of people who had handled Lily's clothing during the rescue and initial medical examination. The timeline established by surveillance footage had gaps that could potentially provide an alternative explanation for Walsh's presence in the neighborhood. Most importantly, the prosecution's case would ultimately depend on a 7-year-old girl who hadn't spoken since her rescue. District Attorney Cooper knew she was taking an enormous risk by proceeding with Lily's testimony. Child witnesses, even under the best circumstances, faced challenges in court that could traumatize them further and potentially derail prosecution efforts. Dr. Chun had made it clear that pushing Lily to testify before she was psychologically ready could cause permanent damage to her recovery process. "We're walking a tightrope," Cooper confided to her deputy, Assistant District Attorney James Walsh, no relation to the defendant. "If we wait too long, public pressure will destroy us, and the case will lose momentum. If we move too quickly, we could re-traumatize that little girl and lose our only witness. And without Lily's testimony, our case becomes much more difficult to prove beyond reasonable doubt." The decision ultimately came down to Dr. Chun's professional assessment. After 6 weeks of intensive therapy, she believed Lily had reached a point where she could potentially testify, but only under very specific conditions. The courtroom would need to be modified to reduce intimidation factors. Lily would need frequent breaks, and Dr. Chun would need to remain present throughout the proceedings to monitor the child's psychological state. "She's still fragile," Dr. Chun warned during the final preparation meeting. But she's also stronger than we initially thought. I believe she wants to tell her story, even if she can't find words yet. The question is whether we can create an environment safe enough for her to do so. The morning of October 15th arrived gray and drizzling, as if nature itself reflected the somber mood surrounding the Riverside County Courthouse. By 7 a.m., news vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching towards storm clouds like mechanical prayers. Reporters clutched steaming coffee cups, while camera crews tested equipment, all waiting for the trial that had captivated the nation's attention. The Case of the People versus Danny Walsh promised to be a courtroom drama that would define careers and determine whether justice could prevail when a community's most innocent member became both victim and key witness. Inside the courthouse courtroom, 4A had been transformed into something resembling a child-friendly environment, while maintaining the dignity of legal proceedings. Judge Patricia Williams, a 25-year veteran of the bench, known for her no-nonsense approach to justice, had overseen the installation of a smaller witness stand, soft lighting to reduce harsh shadows, and a private entrance that would allow Lily Martinez to enter without facing the media circus outside. The gallery buzzed with nervous energy as potential jurors, media representatives, and community members filled every available seat. District Attorney Rachel Cooper adjusted her navy blazer and reviewed her opening statement one final time. 8 weeks of preparation had led to this moment, and she felt the weight of every parent's expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Across the aisle, defense attorney Michael Torres organized his case files with the methodical precision of a man who knew he was fighting an uphill battle. The evidence against his client Danny Walsh appeared overwhelming, but Torres had built his career on finding reasonable doubt in seemingly airtight cases. Danny Walsh sat beside his attorney, his appearance dramatically changed from the surveillance photos that had been plastered across every news outlet in California. Prison had hollowed his cheeks and added premature gray to his brown hair. His nervous fidgeting and darting eyes painted the picture of a guilty man, exactly what the prosecution hoped the jury would see. But Torres knew that appearances could be deceiving, and he was prepared to challenge every piece of evidence the state presented. Judge Williams called the court to order at 9:15 a.m. sharp, her gavel echoing through the packed courtroom like a gunshot. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice carrying the authority of decades spent presiding over some of the county's most serious criminal cases. "You are about to hear testimony in a case that involves the alleged kidnapping and sexual assault of a 7-year-old child. I want to remind everyone present that this courtroom will maintain the highest standards of decorum throughout these proceedings." Cooper's opening statement painted Danny Walsh as a predatory monster who had stalked the quiet neighborhoods of Riverside, looking for the perfect victim. She described how Walsh had targeted Lily Martinez, an innocent child playing in her own backyard, and subjected her to unimaginable horrors that had left permanent scars on her young psyche. The prosecutor's voice remained steady and professional, but her clenched fists betrayed the emotional toll of representing such a vulnerable victim. "The evidence will show," Cooper told the jury, "that Danny Walsh planned this attack with meticulous care. He purchased zip ties and duct tape hours before Lily disappeared. His DNA was found on her clothing. His apartment contained evidence of other planned attacks on children. And most importantly, you will hear from Lily herself, who will courageously tell you what this man did to her in that abandoned railroad shed." Torres rose for his opening statement, knowing that every person in the courtroom wanted to see his client convicted. Public sentiment had already declared Walsh guilty, but the defense attorney's job was to hold the prosecution to their burden of proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt. He spoke carefully about the presumption of innocence, the importance of following evidence rather than emotion, and the possibility that law enforcement's eagerness to solve this case had led them to rush to judgment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Torres said, his voice calm despite the hostile atmosphere, "I ask only that you listen carefully to all the evidence before making your decision. My client maintains his innocence, and as you will see, the prosecution's case contains significant gaps and inconsistencies that should give you pause." The first witness called was Sarah Martinez, Lily's mother, whose testimony reduced half the courtroom to tears. She described the ordinary Tuesday morning when her world changed forever, her voice breaking as she recounted discovering Lily's empty sandbox and the frantic search that followed. Her love for her daughter radiated through every word, and several jurors wiped their eyes as she testified about Lily's ongoing struggle to recover from her trauma. "She used to sing all the time," Sarah whispered, clutching a tissue. "Disney songs, made-up songs about her toys, little melodies she'd hum, wow. Coloring. Now our house is so quiet. She hasn't spoken a single word since that terrible day. Sometimes I catch her staring out her bedroom window, and I wonder if she's looking for the person who hurt her, afraid he might come back." Dr. Jennifer Kim took the stand next, providing clinical testimony about Lily's physical and psychological injuries. Her professional demeanor couldn't mask the anger in her voice as she described the evidence of sexual assault on a child barely out of kindergarten. The medical testimony was necessarily graphic, and Judge Williams had to call 2 brief recesses as several jurors became visibly distressed. The afternoon session featured Detective Maria Santos, who methodically presented the investigation, timeline, and physical evidence. She described the surveillance footage showing Walsh purchasing suspicious items, the discovery of children's clothing in his apartment, and the DNA evidence linking him to the crime. Her testimony painted a picture of thorough police work that had identified and pursued the correct suspect despite his attempts to evade capture. But it was Officer Jake Morrison's testimony that seemed to seal Walsh's fate in the eyes of most observers. Morrison took the stand in his dress uniform, his bearing dignified and professional as he described the search efforts that had consumed the entire Riverside community. Rex, his German Shepherd partner, sat alertly in the gallery, drawing admiring glances from spectators who saw the heroic canine as a symbol of law enforcement's dedication to protecting innocent children. Rex and I worked around the clock searching for Lily, Morrison testified, his voice filled with the quiet pride of a job well done. When we finally found her in that abandoned shed, it was one of the most emotional moments of my career. To know that we had brought that little girl home safely to her family, that's why we do this job. As the day concluded, everyone in courtroom 4A knew that tomorrow would bring the most crucial testimony of all. Lily Martinez would take the stand to face her alleged attacker and tell the court what had happened during those terrible 2 days. No one could have predicted that. Her testimony would shatter everything they thought they knew about this case. The morning of October 16th dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the previous day's gloom. Outside the Riverside County Courthouse, the media presence had doubled overnight, as news outlets from across the nation prepared to cover what promised to be the most emotionally charged testimony in recent legal history. Inside courtroom 4A, every seat was occupied by 9M, with spectators understanding that they were about to witness either justice triumphant or a child's further victimization by an inadequate legal system. Dr. Lisa Chun arrived early, carrying a small bag containing Lily's favorite comfort items, a worn stuffed elephant named Peanut, a soft purple blanket, and crayons in case the 7-year-old needed to communicate through drawings rather than words. Chun had spent the previous evening with Lily and her parents, gently preparing the child for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult day of her young life. Despite 10 weeks of intensive therapy, Lily remained largely nonverbal, communicating primarily through nods, headshakes, and the occasional whispered word to her mother. "Remember, sweetheart, Sarah Martinez had told her daughter the night before. You just need to tell the truth about what happened. Dr. Chun will be right there with you. And Mommy and Daddy will be in the courtroom too. You're so brave, and we're so proud of you. Lily had nodded solemnly, her dark eyes reflecting a wisdom no 7-year-old should possess. Judge Williams called the court to order at 9:15 a.m., her voice gentler than usual as she addressed the packed courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to hear testimony from a child witness. I expect absolute silence and decorum from everyone present. Any disruption will result in immediate removal from my courtroom. The gravity in her voice made it clear that she would tolerate no interference with Lily's testimony. District Attorney Cooper rose slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to call her most crucial witness. Your Honor, the people called Lily Martinez to the stand. A collective intake of breath filled the courtroom as everyone turned toward the private entrance where Lily would enter. The weight of the moment pressed down on every person present. This tiny girl held the key to justice for one of the community's most horrific crimes. The courtroom door opened quietly, and Dr. Chun entered first, followed by Lily Martinez, walking hand in hand with her mother. The 7-year-old looked impossibly small in her carefully chosen outfit, a simple blue dress and white cardigan that Sarah hoped would make her appear both innocent and credible to the jury. Lily's curly hair had been brushed until it shone, held back with a small blue ribbon that matched her dress. But it was her eyes that captured everyone's attention. Those same dark eyes that had once sparkled with childhood joy now carried shadows that seemed far too heavy for such a young soul. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand before releasing her to Dr. Chun's care. The child psychologist guided Lily to the specially modified witness stand, which had been lowered and equipped with a booster seat so the small girl could be seen by the jury. Peanut the elephant was placed within easy reach, and Dr. Chun positioned herself nearby, ready to intervene if Lily became too distressed to continue. Hello, Lily, Judge Williams said in the warmest voice she could muster. Can you tell me your full name? Lily's voice was barely a whisper as she responded, Lily Marie Martinez. The courtroom remained absolutely silent, straining to hear every word from this brave child who held their collective attention. Dr. Chun took over the questioning, her voice gentle and encouraging. Lily, do you remember the day you were playing in your sandbox at home? The little girl nodded, her fingers clutching Peanut tighter. Can you tell us what happened that day? For several minutes, Lily spoke in halting whispers about building her sandcastle, about wanting to show her mommy how tall she had made the towers, about hearing a voice calling her name from the gate behind their yard. I thought it was someone who knew me, Lily said, her voice growing slightly stronger. He knew my name. He said Mommy wanted to see me. The courtroom listened in horrified fascination as this innocent child described being lured away from safety by someone who had clearly studied her routine, her family, her vulnerabilities. As Lily continued her testimony, describing being taken to this scary place and the mean man who hurt her, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew increasingly tense. Danny Walsh sat rigid at the defense table, his face pale but showing no emotion. Several jurors wiped away tears as Lily's small voice described her ordeal in the fragmented way that traumatized children remember events, not as a linear narrative, but as a series of terrifying snapshots that haunted her dreams. Lily, Dr. Chun said gently, you told me there was a dog with the man who took you. Can you tell the court about that? Lily nodded enthusiastically, the first time she had shown any animation during her testimony. A big dog, she said, her voice slightly louder. A police dog. He was pretty, but scary, black and brown and big teeth. It was then that disaster struck the prosecution's case. As Dr. Chun continued her gentle questioning, Lily's gaze wandered around the courtroom, taking in the faces of strangers who were all focused intently on her. Her eyes moved past the jury box, past the defense table where Danny Walsh sat motionless, past the gallery filled with concerned community members. Then her gaze fell on the section reserved for law enforcement witnesses and support personnel. Officer Jake Morrison sat in the third row, his dress uniform immaculate, Rex lying alertly at his feet. The German shepherd's intelligent amber eyes were fixed on Lily, his ears perked forward with interest. Morrison smiled encouragingly at the child, the same gentle expression he had worn when he found her in that abandoned shed 10 weeks ago. Lily's entire body went rigid. Her grip on Peanut tightened until her knuckles turned white. Dr. Chun immediately noticed the change in her young patient's demeanor and followed, her gaze to see what had caused such a dramatic reaction. The courtroom, sensing something was wrong, grew even quieter. Then, in a voice that carried clearly through the silent courtroom, Lily Martinez spoke words that would shatter everything everyone thought they knew about this case. "That's him. That's the man who hurt me." Her small finger pointed directly at Officer Morrison. "That's the bad man with the scary dog." The courtroom erupted. Gasps of shock and disbelief filled the air. Judge Williams banged her gavel frantically, calling for order. Morrison's face drained of all color as every eye in the courtroom turned toward him. Rex, sensing his partner's distress, whined softly and pressed closer to Morrison's legs. District Attorney Cooper stood frozen, her carefully constructed case crumbling around her in real time. Defense Attorney Torres looked as shocked as everyone else, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. "That's the policeman," Lily continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, as if speaking this truth was lifting a terrible weight from her small shoulders. "He said he was helping me find Mommy, but he lied. He took me to the scary place and hurt me." Dr. Chun immediately moved to comfort Lily, but the damage was done. The unthinkable had been spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The chaos that erupted in courtroom following Lily's shocking identification was unlike anything Judge Patricia Williams had witnessed in her 25 years on the bench. Her gavel cracked against the soundbox repeatedly as voices rose. In disbelief, reporters scrambled for their phones, and Officer Jake Morrison sat frozen in his seat, his face drained of all color, while Rex whined anxiously at his feet, sensing his handler's distress, but unable to understand the catastrophe unfolding around them. "Order, order in my courtroom," Judge Williams commanded, her voice cutting through the pandemonium like a blade. "Aleph, clear the gallery immediately. I want everyone except essential personnel out of this courtroom right now." The authority in her voice finally penetrated the shock, and spectators began filing out in stunned silence, many turning back for one last glimpse of the police officer who had just been accused of the very crime he had helped solve. District Attorney Rachel Cooper felt her world tilting off its axis as she watched her star witness point directly at the man who had been celebrated as a hero in this case. Morrison had testified just yesterday about his dedication to finding Lily, his partnership with Rex, his emotional reaction to discovering the traumatized child in that abandoned railroad shed. Now that same child was identifying him as her attacker, and Cooper's legal mind was racing through the implications of this revelation. "Your Honor," Cooper managed, her voice shaky but professional, "I request an immediate recess to investigate this unexpected development." But even as she spoke, she could see the pieces of a horrifying puzzle beginning to fall into place in her mind. Morrison's intimate knowledge of the search areas, his ability to direct the investigation, his access to evidence, all of it could have been used to manipulate the case from the inside. Defense Attorney Michael Torres stood slowly, his shock evident, but his legal instincts already kicking in. "Your Honor, I move for immediate dismissal of all charges against my client. If this child's identification is accurate, then everything the prosecution has presented is based on fabricated evidence planted by the very officer who supposedly found the victim. His voice carried a mixture of vindication and horror. Vindication that his client was innocent. Horror at the realization that a police officer had orchestrated such an elaborate frame-up. Morrison finally found his voice, standing abruptly, and causing Rex to jump to his feet in response. "This is insane," he shouted, his voice cracking with what seemed like genuine desperation. "I saved that little girl. I'm the one who found her. She's traumatized and confused. She doesn't know what she's saying." But his protests rang hollow in the stunned courtroom, and several people noticed how his hands trembled as he spoke. Judge Williams acted with the decisive authority that had made her one of California's most respected jurists. "Bailiff, I want Officer Morrison detained immediately pending investigation. No one is to leave this building until Internal Affairs and the FBI can initiate emergency protocols." She turned to Dr. Chun, who was gently comforting Lily on the witness stand. "Doctor, please remove the child from the courtroom. She's been through enough trauma for one day." Within 30 minutes, courtroom 4A had been cleared except for essential law enforcement personnel, and the largest internal investigation in Riverside Police Department history was already underway. FBI agent Tom Bradley, who had originally been called in to assist with the kidnapping case, now found himself leading a corruption investigation that threatened to shake public trust in law enforcement to its core. The evidence began unraveling. Almost immediately, under renewed scrutiny, Morrison's personnel file revealed financial problems that investigators had previously overlooked. Gambling debts totaling over $80,000, a recent divorce that had left him paying substantial alimony, and a prescription drug dependency that had developed after a back injury 2 years earlier. His access to evidence storage, his knowledge of forensic procedures, and his ability to manipulate Rex's tracking had provided him with the perfect opportunity to commit the crime and frame an innocent man. Detective Maria Santos, who had worked alongside Morrison for 5 years, felt physically sick as she reviewed the investigation timeline with fresh eyes. Morrison had volunteered for every aspect of the search, had been present when key evidence was discovered, and had even suggested some of the search locations where they ultimately found traces of Lily's presence. His heroic narrative about Rex finding Lily in the abandoned shed now took on a sinister new meaning. He had known exactly where to look because he had put her there. The forensic re-examination was devastating to Morrison's credibility. DNA. Evidence that had seemed to implicate Danny Walsh was found to have been contaminated in ways that suggested deliberate tampering. Surveillance footage from the convenience store where Walsh allegedly purchased suspicious items was reviewed with enhanced technology, revealing that the time stamp had been digitally altered. Most damning of all, Rex's tracking patterns during the search were analyzed by K9 experts, who concluded that the dog had been following planted scent trails rather than genuine tracking. Danny Walsh, who had spent 10 weeks in county jail as the community's most hated man, was released with a formal apology from the district attorney's office and the promise of a thorough investigation into his wrongful prosecution. His first stop was the hospital, where he wanted to see Lily Martinez and somehow convey that he harbored no anger toward the child, whose testimony had initially seemed to condemn him, but ultimately revealed the truth. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Riverside community and beyond. Parents who had praised Morrison as a hero now realized that their children had been in danger from the very person sworn to protect them. The police department faced unprecedented scrutiny as every case Morrison had worked on over his 12-year career would need to be reviewed for possible corruption or evidence tampering. Rex, the innocent German shepherd who had been manipulated into participating in his handler's crimes, was immediately removed from Morrison's custody and placed with a temporary foster, family, while animal psychologists evaluated him for signs of trauma or conditioning. The dog had simply been following commands from his trusted human partner, never knowing that those commands were leading him to participate in a monstrous deception. As Morrison was led away in handcuffs, the reality of his situation seemed to finally penetrate his shock. The respected police officer, who had been celebrated as a community hero just days earlier, now faced charges of kidnapping, sexual assault of a minor, evidence tampering, perjury, and conspiracy. His carefully constructed facade had been shattered by the honest words of a 7-year-old girl who simply told the truth about what had happened to her. The investigation was far from over, but one thing was already crystal clear. The real monster had been hiding behind a badge, and justice would now have to account for the betrayal of public trust that made his crimes even more heinous. 6 months after that devastating day in courtroom 4A, Jake Morrison stood before Judge Patricia Williams for the final time, no longer wearing the uniform he had dishonored, but Orange County jail coveralls that marked him as what he had always been beneath his badge, a predator who had betrayed every oath he had ever taken. The packed courtroom bore witness to justice finally being served, though the scars left by his crimes would take much longer to heal than any legal proceeding could address. Morrison's plea agreement had spared the community a lengthy trial that would have further traumatized Lily Martinez, but it came at a heavy price. He pleaded guilty to kidnapping in the first degree, sexual assault of a minor, evidence tampering, perjury, conspiracy, and abuse of authority under color of law. The cumulative sentence, life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. As Judge Williams read the terms, Morrison's shoulders sagged with the weight of his destroyed life, while Lily's parents held each other tightly in the gallery, finally seeing justice for their daughter's suffering. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Williams said, her voice carrying the cold authority of absolute judgment, "you violated the sacred trust placed in you by this community. You used your position of authority to commit unspeakable acts against an innocent child, then compounded those crimes by framing another innocent man. The badge you wore was meant to protect people like Lily Martinez, not to provide you with opportunities to victimize them. This court sentences you to spend the remainder of your natural life in prison, where you will have ample time to contemplate the lives you have destroyed." The Riverside Police Department faced the most comprehensive internal investigation in California law enforcement history. Chief Robert Martinez, no relation to Lily's family, had been forced to resign in disgrace, as federal investigators uncovered a pattern of inadequate oversight that had allowed Morrison to operate unchecked. For years, the department's new leadership implemented revolutionary changes. Mandatory psychological evaluations every 6 months for all officers, independent oversight of evidence handling, and a civilian review board with real authority to investigate misconduct allegations. Every case Morrison had touched during his 12-year career required complete re-examination. 3 other convictions were overturned when evidence of his tampering was discovered, leading to additional lawsuits and further erosion of public trust. The financial cost to the city exceeded $20 million in settlements, but the damage to community faith in law enforcement proved incalculable. Rex, the innocent German shepherd who had been manipulated into participating in his handler's crimes, found redemption through the dedication of canine specialist Dr. Amanda Foster. The dog had suffered severe psychological trauma from the conflicting commands and abuse he had endured, requiring months of rehabilitation to overcome his conditioning. Eventually, Rex was paired with Officer Maria Santos, who had requested the assignment as part of her own healing process, after learning her partner had been a monster. "Rex is not responsible for what Morrison did to him," Dr. Foster explained during one of many interviews about the case. "Dogs are pure creatures who trust their handlers completely. Morrison exploited that trust, just as he exploited his position. as a police officer. Rex's rehabilitation has been remarkable. He's learning to trust again, and his new partnership with Officer Santos shows that healing is possible even after the worst betrayals. Danny Walsh's exoneration brought him national attention as an advocate for criminal justice reform, but the cost of his wrongful imprisonment could never be fully calculated. 10 weeks in county jail, as a suspected child molester had earned him death threats, assault attempts, and psychological trauma that required extensive counseling. His civil lawsuit against the city resulted in a $12 million settlement, which he used to establish the Walsh Foundation for the wrongfully accused, providing legal assistance and support services for others caught in similar nightmares. "I don't blame Lily Martinez for anything," Walsh said during his first public interview after his exoneration. "She was a traumatized little girl, trying to make sense of something no child should ever experience. I'm grateful that she found the courage to speak the truth when it mattered most. Her bravery not only freed me, but prevented Morrison from hurting other children." The healing journey for Lily Martinez and her family proved to be the longest and most challenging aspect of the entire ordeal. Dr. Lisa Chun continued working with Lily through twice-weekly therapy sessions that gradually helped the 8-year-old process her trauma and reclaim her childhood voice. A breakthrough came during their 1-year anniversary session, when Lily spontaneously began singing softly at first, then with growing confidence, a Disney song she had loved before her kidnapping. "That was the moment I knew we had turned the corner," Dr. Chun later explained. Lily's ability to sing again represented her reclaiming the joy that Morrison had tried to steal from her. It wasn't just about finding her voice. It was about finding herself again. Sarah and Carlos Martinez filed a groundbreaking civil lawsuit against the city that resulted in more than financial compensation. Their $18 million settlement included provisions for funding the Lily Martinez Center for Child Advocacy, a state-of-the-art facility providing comprehensive services for young trauma victims. The center featured child-friendly interview rooms, specialized medical facilities, and therapeutic programs designed to help children heal from the worst imaginable experiences while ensuring their voices are heard and believed. "Our daughters' suffering had to mean something," Sarah Martinez said at the center's dedication ceremony. "If Lily's courage in speaking the truth can help other children find their voices and prevent other families from experiencing what we went through, then maybe something good can come from something so terrible." The case became a landmark study in law enforcement schools across the nation, forever changing how police departments screen officers, handle evidence, and investigate crimes involving children. The Morrison Protocol, a comprehensive set of safeguards designed to prevent similar corruption, was adopted by hundreds of agencies nationwide. Most importantly, Lily Martinez grew into a confident, articulate young woman who understood that her courage in speaking truth to power had not only brought her justice, but had helped protect countless other children from predators hiding behind positions of authority. At age 8, she had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truth, and speaking that truth, no matter how frightening, can change the world. The monster who had worn a badge was gone forever, locked away where he could never hurt another child. Justice had been served, healing had begun, and the community had learned that true heroism sometimes comes from the most unexpected sources, like a brave little girl who simply told the truth.